The rain didn't just fall, it attacked. It hammered the coast of Port Gray Harbor with horizontal violence, a relentless assault from the Atlantic that had been raging for 12 hours. For Ria Navarro, a 28-year-old single mother, this was just another night shift. As an EMT, she thrived on chaos. But tonight's chaos felt different. It felt personal. In the back of her response unit, her 6-year-old son, Leo, was fast asleep, bundled in his favorite dinosaur blanket. The last-minute cancellation from his babysitter had left Ria with no choice. It was either bring him along or miss the shift, and missing the shift wasn't an option. Rent was due. The storm's fury was amplified by the screaming wind that rocked the heavy vehicle. The dispatch radio was a nightmare of static and overlapping calls. The city's sea dikes, old and neglected, were failing. Her route along the coastal highway was cut off by a surge of black water, detouring inland. She passed the edge of Seabrook Executive Field, a private airport for the city's elite. It was unrecognizable. What was usually a pristine tarmac was now a churning lagoon of salt water, debris, and runway lights blinking uselessly beneath the surface. Then she saw it, a light jet, sleek and white, was being mauled by the floodwaters. It had been pushed off the runway and was now wedged hard in a wide drainage culvert, the tidal surge sucking it relentlessly toward the main canal. The water was already halfway up the fuselage. The aircraft was sinking. Ria's hands tightened on the wheel. The 911 switchboard was completely overloaded. She hadn't been able to get a clear dispatch in 20 minutes. This was a dead zone. Her training took over. Instinct, sharp and absolute, made her spin the wheel. She slammed the response unit through a chain-link security gate, the flimsy lock snapping under the vehicle's weight. She parked, angling the headlights toward the drowning jet. "Leo," she said, her voice firm, cutting through his sleep. He stirred, blinking. "Listen to me. I need you to lock the doors right after I get out. Do not open them for anyone. You see this bracelet?" She touched the small, colorful band on his wrist. "If you are scared, you press the red button. Understand?" He nodded, his eyes wide but trusting. "Okay, Mommy." Ria grabbed her primary trauma bag, slammed the door, and heard the electronic click of the locks behind her. She ran into the storm. The water was immediate, a cold shock that soaked her pants to the knee. As she got closer, she heard a horrific, groaning shriek of metal under pressure. Through the emergency exit over the wing, she saw a shadow of movement inside. The fuselage was tilting precariously as the water lifted it, and a man was pinned beneath the heavy cabin door, which had apparently been torn from its hinges in the crash. There was no time. The plane was groaning its last rites. She ran back to her unit, grabbing the small hydraulic jack from the utility compartment and a heavy tow strap. She waded back, the brown, murky water now swirling at her hips. The acrid smell of aviation fuel burned her nostrils and made her eyes water. She jammed the jack into a gap between the twisted door and the fuselage. Using the strap for leverage, she pumped the handle, her muscles screaming against the resistance. The water was a living thing, fighting her, trying to pull the jet under. With a final, agonizing metallic tear, the door shifted just enough. "Now," she yelled. She plunged her arms into the dark cabin, grabbing a handful of a wet, expensive-feeling jacket. She pulled. The man was heavy, a dead weight. She braced her feet against the wing's edge and hauled him out of the cabin, dragging him clear just as the fuselage gave a final lurch and settled deeper. She dragged him across the submerged wing, her own knees scraping raw against a bent, jagged wing flap she couldn't see in the dark water. She got him to the relative safety of a concrete divider. He was in his 30s, dark hair plastered to his skull, his face pale. He coughed, spitting up seawater. He was semi-conscious, his eyes fluttering open. He focused on her EMT patch. His voice was a raw whisper, thick with a distinct Italian-American accent. "No," he choked out. "No. Cops. No hospital." Ria's hands were already moving, assessing. Her fingers found a rapid, thready pulse. She saw a dislocated shoulder. The the joint protruding at an unnatural angle. As she cut away his soaked shirt, she saw a simple, heavy wristband, not a watch, but an insignia, a stylized bird of prey. It looked like a marker from a private corporation. The distant sound of sirens faded, likely rerouted by another flooded street. She was on her own. He was going into shock. "I'm not calling anyone yet," she said, her voice all professional calm. She tilted his head, clearing his airway of water and bile. She found a rigid SAM splint in her bag and began to immobilize the shoulder. She ripped open a silver hypothermia blanket and wrapped it tight around his torso. "Mommy?" Leo's voice was a terrified scream. "Mommy, bad men." Ria's head snapped up. Her blood went cold. Along the airport's perimeter fence, caught in the sweeping beam of her unit's headlights, were multiple figures. They were dressed in dark rain gear, moving fast. They weren't first responders. They were carrying long, black batons that sparked with blue electricity at the tips. Stun batons. They were searching, fanning out, their movements tactical, and they were not looking to rescue anyone. Ria made a decision in less than a second. She grabbed the injured man under his good arm. "Can you stand?" He groaned, but he tried, leveraging himself up with her help. She half carried, half dragged him the final 30 feet to the response unit. She hit the unlock button, threw open the passenger door, and shoved him inside, heedless of his injury. She sprinted to her own side, jumping in and slamming the door. The figures by the fence had seen them. They were running, shouting. Ria threw the vehicle into reverse, spun the wheel, and floored the accelerator. She didn't drive back toward the broken gate. She swerved onto a narrow, unpaved service road that ran parallel to the dark canal, a path barely wide enough for the truck. In her side mirror, she saw the men stop at the edge of the water, watching her go. Then, the night and the relentless. Driving rain swallowed them. Beside her, the man lapsed back into unconsciousness, leaving Ria alone with her sleeping son in the back and a dying jet disappearing into the flood behind them. Ria's rental was a small house at the very end of a dark, narrow alley, usually a refuge of quiet in the loud city. Tonight, it was a fortress. Her hand, steady from years of medical practice, engaged the deadbolt, slid the chain, and kicked down the floor jammer. 3 locks. Leo had woken up during the frantic drive, his voice small. "Mommy, I'm scared." "I know. Baby, we're home." She had carried him inside, his damp pajamas clinging to him. Now, she settled him in his bedroom, turning the small television to the cartoon channel but keeping the volume off. The silent, frantic images of animated animals were a surreal backdrop. "Stay here. Okay, I have to help the man. He's sick." She brought him a box of animal crackers and a juice box, a small anchor of normalcy. He nodded, his eyes wide, and huddled under his covers. Ria closed his door almost all the way, leaving just a crack. The man was laid out on her sofa, his expensive clothes ruined by mud and salt water. He was shivering, his skin clammy, but his eyes were sharp. "My name," he said, his voice a low grate, "is Matteo Vascaro. I'm 35. He paused, his gaze assessing her. Her small living room, the worn furniture. "I'm in maritime shipping. I also run a charity, the Aurora Tide Foundation." Ria ignored the introduction, her hands already at work. She was an EMT, not a hostess. Her fingers found his pulse. It was fast, over 120 beats per minute. His core temperature was dropping. The shoulder was badly dislocated, the joint pushed forward unnaturally, and she could see dark, chafed bruises on both his wrists, the kind left by heavy-duty restraints. She had found his wallet when checking his pockets for injuries. It was thin, alligator skin, and held almost nothing. There were no company IDs, no credit cards, no driver's license, just a single, heavy card of brushed black metal, cold to the touch, engraved with a logo Vanguard Étoile Capital, tucked behind the silk lining. She found a tiny, metallic capsule, the size of a vitamin, hidden by a piece of luxury brand medical tape, a data key. "I'm stabilizing your shoulder, but it needs to be set," she said. her voice clipped and professional. She found her medical shears and cut away the remaining fabric of his shirt. While she worked, she grabbed her own phone off the counter. She went to the kitchen, took a roll of aluminum foil, and tore off a long sheet. She wrapped her phone in it, then placed it in a metal biscuit tin and put the lid on tight. A homemade Faraday cage. A trick she'd read about. A paranoid quirk. Tonight. It felt necessary. Matteo watched her, a flicker of pained approval in his eyes. Smart. Who were those men at the airport? He ignored the question. Don't call the MIB, he rasped. The Metropolitan Integrity Bureau. Whatever you do, don't call them. If you're a missing businessman, they're exactly who I should call. They're compromised, Matteo said, his teeth gritting. They have insiders from the Kestrel Union. They'll hand me right back to them, and those men won't be carrying stun batons next time. The Kestrel Union. The name sounded like something from a spy film, but the fear in his voice was real. The small television in Leo's room flickered, the silent cartoons suddenly interrupted by a news crawl. Rhea moved to the doorway, turning the volume up just enough to hear. A local anchor was reading from a script, the storm raging on the green screen behind him. In related news, prominent shipping entrepreneur Matteo Vascaro has been reported missing. His private jet lost contact with Seabrook Executive Field during the storm amid a contentious transportation dispute. A blurry photo of Matteo flashed on the screen cleaner, Sharper, wearing a suit. Rhea's personal phone, the one she kept for emergencies and hadn't put in the box, vibrated on her hip. It was a message in her cul-de-sac's neighborhood chat group. Her neighbor, an older woman named Brenda, had typed, "Anyone else seeing those strange headlights a few SUVs keep sweeping the street." A cold dread settled in Rhea's stomach. She moved to her front window, careful to stand to the side, and pulled the curtain back a fraction of an inch. The street was dark. She looked up. There, perched on the edge of her own rain gutter, was a small, black drone. Its single red optical light was aimed directly at her front door. It wasn't flying, it was waiting. She let the curtain fall. She was being watched. "I have to set your shoulder," she said, her voice dropping. "This is the last time I ask. Who are you?" "I'm the man you saved," he said. "Now please, do it." She nodded. "Brace yourself." She put her foot against his ribs for leverage, grabbed his forearm, and pulled with a swift, violent, and practiced motion. Matteo's body went rigid. He didn't scream, but a sharp, agonizing hiss of air escaped his teeth. His head threw back, and the sound of the joint popping back into its socket was a sickening, wet thunk. He panted, sweat and rain on his forehead. The violent movement had torn the rest of his shirt open. On his good shoulder, a tattoo was now visible. It was a large, detailed hawk, its wings spread, but the entire image had been brutally crossed out with thick black bars of new ink, like a prisoner marking out a betrayal. Her emergency phone rang, a blocked number. She answered, "This is Navarro." "Good evening, Miss Navarro." The voice was male, polite, and sounded like customer service. "This is the Seabrook Airport Emergency Support Team. We're compiling a witness list for tonight's aircraft incident. Our logs show your unit was active near the perimeter. We'd like to send a car to collect your statement." Seabrook was a private field. It didn't have an emergency support team that cold-called EMTs during a hurricane. "I was routed away from the field. I saw nothing," Rhea said. She hung up the phone, immediately powered it down, and popped the back open, pulling the SIM card out with her fingernail. She tossed the small chip into the sink. Matteo was watching her, his expression a mixture of pain and grim respect. The black of the sky was turning to a deep, bruised purple. Dawn. And with the dawn, she heard it. Not an engine, but the sound of heavy tires rolling through standing water, a soft, wet hissing. Rhea moved back to the window, her heart a cold stone in her chest. One by one, they filed into her cul-de-sac. They were not police. They were not ambulances. They were 5, identical, black SUVs, Their windows were tinted so dark they looked like slabs of obsidian. They moved slowly, in formation. They passed her house, their headlights sweeping across her thin curtains, illuminating the room in a sudden, harsh glare. They reached the end of the street, turned around in a silent, synchronized ballet, and started back. They were not searching. They were patrolling. The headlights of the patrolling SUVs swept the living room again, casting long, monstrous shadows. "Get in here," Rhea whispered, her voice tight. She pushed Mateo toward the small laundry room off the kitchen. It's the only room without a direct window to the street. He moved, his body stiff with pain, and wedged himself between the washing machine and the utility sink. Rhea was about to close the door when a small voice piped up. "Mommy, is that man a pirate?" Leo stood in the hallway, rubbing his eyes, his dinosaur blanket clutched in one fist. He stared, not at Rhea, but at the large, wounded man crammed into the laundry room. Rhea's heart stopped. She moved to intercept him, but Mateo shifted. He lowered himself, wincing as his muscles screamed, until he was closer to Leo's eye level, and he didn't offer a hand, just a small, tired smile. It was surprisingly gentle. "No, kid," Mateo said, his voice rough. "Not a pirate, I just had a bad day with my boat." Leo considered this, his 6-year-old logic processing. "Your boat sank." "That's right." Leo's fear visibly receded, replaced by curiosity. Rhea let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. She knelt in front of her son. "I need you to be a big boy and stay in your room for a little while." "Okay, we're playing a quiet game." She guided him back to his bed, then returned to the kitchen. She faced Mateo, her expression hard as stone. "Rule number 1, she said, her voice barely audible but vibrating with intensity. Nobody touches my son. I don't know who you are, but that is the only thing that matters. You can stay or you can go, but you don't lie to me in my house, not while he's here." Mateo looked at her, his dark eyes holding hers. The gap between them was filled with the hum of the refrigerator and the distant hiss of tires on wet pavement. He nodded, a single sharp dip of his chin. "No lies," he agreed. He reached into his pocket, his good hand fumbling with the wet fabric, and produced the tiny metallic capsule she had seen earlier. He held it out. "This is why they're here." Rhea took it. It was heavy for its size. "What is it?" "Insurance and a motive." Before she could ask more, her EMT training kicked in. The drone on the roof, the polite phone call, the patrol. They were hunting him, but they were watching her. She grabbed a multi-purpose tool from her utility drawer, the kind with pliers and a cheap voltmeter. She switched it to its most sensitive setting, looking for a signal. She moved through the kitchen. Nothing. She entered the living room. As she passed the main wall outlet, the meter gave a faint, almost imperceptible buzz. She knelt. Tucked into the plastic molding, disguised as a thumbtack, was a tiny, black pinhole camera. An infrared light, invisible to the naked eye, blinked steadily. "Someone has been in this house," she whispered, her blood turning to ice. "I know," Mateo said from the doorway. He was leaning heavily on the frame. "They weren't expecting me to survive. My jet didn't crash. Rhea, it was diverted. Someone on the inside opened the estuary sluice gates. They flooded the runway, forcing us into that canal. It wasn't an accident, it was an execution. Or a capture." The men with stun batons. "Asset recovery," he sneered. "The Kestrel Union sanitation team. They were there to grab me alive." Because of this, she held up the capsule. Because of what's in it, he finally told her. Ghost ledgers. Shipping manifests for cargo that doesn't exist. Routes that hide human trafficking and weapons. Port codes and video. Direct evidence of bribery. Clear enough to destroy the Kestrel Union, Vanguard Etoile Capital, and the men they have inside the MIB. Rhea stared at the capsule. This was a war, and she was standing in the middle of it. She needed help, but not from the police. She pulled her burner phone, the cheap, untraceable one she kept for emergencies from the biscuit tin. She dialed a number she knew by heart. "Pike?" a sleepy voice answered. "Nadia, It's me. I have a problem. A big one. Ria spoke quickly, her voice low. I need you to analyze a data package. It's dirty. Very dirty. Ria, what the hell? It's 5 a.m. Meet me at the old St. Jude's library. The abandoned one. 1 hour. Bring your kit. Nadia. The heavy kit. She hung up before her friend could argue. As she pocketed the phone, a new sound cut through the rain, the deep, heavy idle of a diesel engine. One of the SUVs had stopped. It was parked directly in front of her house. A car door closed, soft, authoritative footsteps on her porch. Then, a knock. It wasn't a police knock, not a frantic banging. It was a polite, neighborly tap. Ria looked at Mateo. His face was pale. She moved to the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked through the peephole. A woman stood on her porch, silhouetted by the headlights. She was older, perhaps in her 60s, with a severe, elegant sweep of silver hair. She wore a simple, dark raincoat and no expression at all. Ria slid the chain lock into place and opened the door just that far. The woman smiled. It was a terrible, bloodless expression. Good morning, she said, her voice accented. Eastern European. You are Ria Navarro. It wasn't a question. Who are you? My name is Yelena Kovac. You pulled a man from his own private aircraft tonight, in the storm. That was very brave. Good for you. The smile never wavered. Now, give him back to me, and your child stays safe. The threat was so clean, so direct. It was like a scalpel. Ria fought the urge to slam the door. She forced a tremor into her voice. He's hurt. I have to get my son. He's sleeping. Yelena's smile widened, a predator indulging its prey. Of course. You have 10 minutes. Do not try to call anyone. We are listening. Ria closed the door. She leaned against it, her legs shaking. She's not lying, Mateo said. I know. Ria's mind was racing. She looked at the thumbtack camera. We are listening. She ran to the hall closet, pulling out her small, robotic vacuum. She grabbed the burner phone, typed a command to activate its broadband signal, and taped it to the top of the Roomba. She pressed the on button. The vacuum whirred to life, its internal speaker cheerfully announcing it was starting a cleaning cycle. It rolled out into the living room, a moving, screaming source of electronic noise, designed to deafen any listening device in the room. The back door, Ria hissed. She grabbed Leo from his bed, wrapping him in his dinosaur blanket. He was half asleep, murmuring, We're playing the game, baby. We have to be very, very quiet now. She led them through the dark kitchen to the back door, a flimsy thing. She unlatched it. The backyard was a muddy mess, bordered by a 6-foot-tall wooden fence, mostly rotted. Go, she ordered Mateo. There, the third panel from the left. Push. He put his good shoulder to the wood. It groaned and gave way. My neighbor, Ria whispered, ushering Leo through the gap. Always leaves his keys in his truck. It's the blue pickup. She pushed Mateo through after her son, then slid through herself. They ran, hunched over, through the neighbor's yard. The rain was a curtain, washing away their tracks. They piled into the truck, Ria sliding behind the wheel. Leo and Mateo crammed onto the passenger side. The keys were there, on the dash, just as she'd said. Ria turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life. She didn't turn on the headlights. She put the truck in gear and rolled down the alley, away from the cul-de-sac, as the rain hammered down, covering their escape. The stolen pickup truck hit the flooded highway, its high suspension a small blessing as it plowed through 2 feet of churning water. But the blessing was short-lived. In the rearview mirror, bathed in the sickly orange glow of the emergency lights, they appeared 1, then 2, then 3, 4, 5, the black SUVs. They had found them, or they had anticipated this exact escape route. They fanned out, 2 flanking from the right, 2 from the left, 1 hanging back, a classic pincer movement. They were hurting her. Mommy, who are they? Leo's voice was small and terrified from the passenger floor, where Ria had pushed him for safety. They're just lost. Baby, close your eyes. "They're not lost," Matteo said, his voice a low growl. He was twisted in his seat. Looking back, "They're Kestrel. They'll run us into the canal." "They can't," Rhea said, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Not if I get off this road." She saw her opening, a dark, narrow gap in the guardrail, marked by a faded sign, Port Gray Authority, service access only. She spun the wheel. The truck hydroplaned for a terrifying second, then the tires bit into the gravel of the service road. She killed the headlights, plunging them into near total darkness, driving by the faint light of the storm-churned sky. The SUVs followed, their powerful engines roaring, but the narrow road forced them into a single file. It bought her seconds. "Where does this go?" Matteo asked, his hand braced on the dashboard. "It runs the length of the shipping terminals." "The terminals?" "Yes," he said, a new energy in his voice. "There. See that overpass? The green one. Head for it. There's a graveyard." "A graveyard?" "Container graveyard, where they put the decommissioned stock. Go." She cut the wheel again, driving the truck down a muddy embankment and under the massive concrete bridge. The world became a canyon of rusting steel. Stacks of shipping containers, 40 feet high, formed narrow, dark alleys. The rain and the noise of the highway above muffled their engine. Rhea navigated the maze, the truck's wheels spinning in the mud. In her mirror, she saw the beams of the SUVs as they entered the yard, spreading out, trying to find her. "Left here," Matteo directed. "Go past the red Maersk stack. Now, right." He led her deeper into the steel labyrinth. She saw a wide, low-lying area ahead, a pool of black water at least 4 feet deep. "Can we make it through that?" she asked. "We can. That old pickup is high enough. They can't. Their center of gravity is too low. The engines will flood before they're halfway." Rhea took a deep breath and floored it. The truck bucked, the engine screamed, and water surged over the hood. But the tires found purchase. They made it to the other side, dripping and shaking. She looked back. One of the SUVs, a black Escalade, had tried to follow. It was now stuck, its lights flickering, dead in the water. The other 4 had stopped, their beams fixed on their trapped companion. She killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the rain drumming on the steel roof and the distant shouts of angry men. Leo, jolted by the violent ride, began to cry, not a loud cry, but a series of terrified, hiccuping sobs. "Shh, shh, Leo, it's okay, Mommy's here." Matteo slid off the bench seat, ignoring his own pain, and knelt on the floorboard in front of the boy. He held up his good hand. "Hey, it's okay. You know, when I was a kid and I got scared, my grandfather, he would tell me a story about the stars." Leo's sobs quieted. "He said the stars are just tiny ships," Matteo said, his voice a low, warm rumble. "And they sail across the dark, and they never get lost, because every ship has an anchor. You just have to find your anchor." While he spoke, Rhea pulled out her burner phone. She opened a new message, attached the data capsules file which she'd managed to copy, and addressed it to Nadia. She found the schedule send function and set a timer 30 minutes. If she didn't cancel the send, Nadia would get everything. A dead man's switch. "We can't stay here," she whispered. "They'll come on foot." Matteo nodded. "That one." He pointed to a long, white, refrigerated container, its door slightly ajar. "Reefer, it'll be insulated. They won't be able to hear us breathe." They moved quickly, scrambling from the truck, and slipped inside the container. It was dark, empty, and smelled of rust and faint, unidentifiable chemicals. Rhea eased the heavy door closed, leaving only a tiny crack for air. Matteo slumped against the wall, breathing heavily. There was mud caked on his face. Rhea, acting on an instinct she didn't understand, reached out. She used the sleeve of her jacket to gently wipe the mud from his cheek. He didn't flinch. Her fingers were inches from his mouth, the space between them, cold and damp, suddenly felt electric. He was looking at her, his eyes unreadable in the dark. "That's twice," he murmured, his voice barely a breath. "Twice you've saved my life." "I'm an EMT. It's what I do." Not like this, you don't... She pulled her hand back, but her other hand was still on his chest, where she had put it to check his heart rate. She could feel the solid, hot muscle beneath the damp fabric, the steady, strong thump of his pulse. His breathing was shallow. His skin was cold again. He was starting to tremble from shock and cold. "Can I?" he asked, his voice so low she almost missed it. "Can I ask you to do something? I can't stop shaking." She knew what he was asking before he said it. She nodded. He shifted, his good arm coming around her, pulling her close. It was not a lover's embrace. It was the hug of a drowning man. Rhea completed it, her arms going around his waist, her face pressing against his good shoulder. She was his anchor. They stayed like that for a long time. His forehead rested against hers. His back was bowed, shielding her from the door, as if he could protect her with his own broken body. Her hands, which had saved him, now gripped the back of his shirt, holding on, the line between protector and protected, between desire and survival, blurred into nothing. Then they heard it. Footsteps, heavy, sloshing through the water, a metallic shing sound. Rhea's head snapped up. A beam of light shot through the crack in the door. Then came a sound that made her stomach clench the zit of a stun baton, and the scrape of it dragging along the outside of their steel wall. They were checking every container. Rhea put a finger to her lips, her eyes locked on Leo, who was frozen with fear. She mouthed the word, "breathe." The footsteps stopped right outside their door. They held their breath. The world stopped. After an eternity, the footsteps moved on. They waited another 5 minutes before Rhea dared to move. She found a release latch for a ventilation hatch at the far end of the container. She pushed it open. It led to a narrow gap between their container and the next. They slipped out, one by one, into the mud and rain. "They're not going to stop," Rhea said, her voice flat. "You need to tell me. Why are you worth all of this?" Matteo looked at her, the rain washing the new layer of grime from his face. "Because I'm the boss, or I was. I run the Voscaro family. My father built an empire on shipping some legal, some not. I've been trying to change things, move us into the light, cut out men like Kestrel, go legitimate." He gave a bitter laugh. "It turns out your old partners and your new enemies, they hate that. They'd rather have a martyr than a reformer." Rhea stared at him. A mafia boss. She had saved a mafia boss. "If we live through this," she said, her voice as cold and hard as the steel containers, "you turn yourself in." He looked surprised. "Not for this. Not for the Kestrel Union, for your old crimes, the ones you're trying to run from. You walk into the Attorney General's office and you confess. I'll be your witness. I'll tell them what you did for my son. I'll tell them how you tried to do the right thing at the end." Matteo looked at this woman, this single mother, this EMT who had braved a storm, reset his shoulder and hidden him in a box, and he saw something he hadn't seen in a decade. He saw a person who couldn't be bought. He nodded. Okay. The abandoned library of St. Jude's was a tomb of forgotten knowledge, smelling of mold, damp paper, and the sea. Nadia Pike had turned a stone sacristy table into a high-tech command center. Her laptop, powered by a heavy battery pack, cast the only light in the cavernous room, illuminating shelves of rotting books. Leo was asleep on a pile of choir robes in the corner, a small, still point in the chaos. "Okay," Nadia said, her voice echoing slightly. She held the small metallic capsule between her fingers. "This thing is military grade. No ports, no seams. It's completely inert." "It has to open," Rhea insisted, her arms crossed. Nadia plugged a flat biometric scanner into her laptop. "It's not looking for a password. It's looking for a key. A biological one." She looked at Matteo, who was leaning against a bookshelf, his face pale but his eyes sharp. "It's locked to you, isn't it?" He nodded. "I need a baseline. Put your hand here," Nadia said, pointing to the scanner pad, "and I need your other hand on this." She attached a small sensor to the capsule itself. "It's a rotating cipher, probably linked to your vital signs. Your heartbeat is the decryption key. Matteo placed his good hand on the pad, the laptop screen, which had been dark, flashed with lines of code. Nadia's fingers flew across her keyboard. Okay. Got a handshake. Hold steady. The capsule on the table clicked. A tiny blue light blinked on. The laptop screen exploded with data. It wasn't spreadsheets. It was a map, a living diagram of the Atlantic seaboard. My God, Nadia whispered, scrolling. This isn't a ledger, it's a black pipeline. She pointed to the screen. Dozens of shipping routes were highlighted in red. These are your ghost ships. They're running empty containers out of Freewater Port, but they're pinging as full weight. Look at this, the Silver Kestrel. It's been reported as scrapped for 6 months, but it's active. Right here. She brought up another window, encrypted bank codes, lists of offshore accounts. Project Swan, Matteo said, pointing to a recurring file name. Project Swan, Nadia repeated, typing. It's linked. Holy hell. It's linked to the Port Grey Commission and back to your friends at Vanguard Etoile Capital. This isn't just smuggling. This is corporate and government corruption on a massive scale. Bribes, video files of... God, this is everything. Nadia sat back, her face grim. This is too big for us. This goes to the MIB right now. We hand it over. We walk away. No, Ria said immediately. Matteo flinched, but she was looking at Nadia. We can't. The MIB is compromised. The Kestrel Union has people inside. The woman at my house, Yelena. She knew I'd be home. They were listening. That call from Seabrook Support. They're dirty. Matteo nodded. She's right. Giving this to the MIB is giving it back to them. Then what? Nadia demanded. We can't just sit on it. We don't, Ria said, her mind working, assembling a plan like she would assemble a trauma response. We don't give it to one person. We give it to everyone. We've split the package into 4. 3 for the biggest newspapers on the coast and 1 for the state attorney general. Not the city, the state. We send them all at the exact same time. They can't kill the story if everyone has it. Nadia stared at her. Then a slow smile spread across her face. A data bomb. I like it. She went back to work, partitioning the files. As she dug deeper into the directory, she frowned. There's a hidden file here, a contingency folder. It's not about shipping. She clicked. The file opened. It was a simple text document, a single line. Protection target, Leo Navarro. The air left Ria's lungs. What is that? It's a leverage file, Matteo said, his voice suddenly ice cold. He was looking at something far beyond the room. They weren't just watching you because of me tonight. They've been watching you for weeks. Yelena? She wasn't just guessing. He looked at Ria, his eyes filled with a dawning, horrific realization. About a year ago, a gas main explosion at the old industrial park. A man was trapped under a collapsed gantry. An EMT unit got there, broke protocol, and went in before the site was clear. Pulled him out. Saved his life. Ria remembered the heat, the smell of sulfur. He was just a worker. He was my brother, Matteo said. My estranged brother. I've been trying to get him away from the family. Yelena must have been watching him. And she saw who saved him. She saw you. He finally understood. They've had you marked as my potential weakness for a year. They were just waiting to use it. Ria's hand, the same hand that could intubate a patient in a moving ambulance, began to tremble. Her son. This whole time, her son was a name in a file. Matteo saw the tremor. He moved, his body aching, and did the only thing he could. He reached out and covered her shaking hand with his own. His hand was large, warm and steady. He didn't say anything. He just held her hand, his thumb stroking slowly, firmly, across the back of her knuckles. It was not a gesture of passion. It was a promise, a silent, binding oath. I am here. He will not be touched. Nadia looked up, her face pale. I'm setting the timer. It'll drop in 24 hours. You 3 need to be ghosts, the deepest hole you can find. She hit the enter key. It's done. As the word done left her lips, a sound echoed through the stone building, a deep, rusty, discordant clang. They all froze. The old church bell, silent for a decade, was ringing, slow and deliberate. "Clang!" "They're here," Nadia whispered. They doused the lights. The room was plunged back into darkness. Mateo grabbed Leo, who stirred but didn't wake. "This way," Nadia hissed. She pulled open a heavy wooden door behind the old chancel, revealing stone steps leading down. Service tunnels. They connect to the main seawall. Ria, Mateo, and the sleeping child plunged into the darkness of the church basement, the smell of incense and dust giving way to cold, damp stone. Far away, they could hear the low, mournful wail of a ship's horn and the persistent, sharp smell of the sea, calling them out into the rainy night. The tunnel spat them out onto the canal embankment, a river of concrete just feet from the churning brown water. They ran for half a mile in the driving rain before they found it. The Blue Egret, a tiny, single-story motel tucked under a rusted highway bridge. Its neon sign was flickering, the B and G dead, leaving a blinking Lou E. Ret as its only beacon. It was the kind of place you went to disappear. Ria paid cash the last $200 she had in her emergency go bag for a room with 2 beds. It was small, the air thick with the smell of industrial cleaner and damp carpet. A single tungsten lamp cast a warm, yellow glow, making the raindrops on the single window look like melting gold. Leo, exhausted, didn't even question the strange room. He climbed into the top bunk bed, a small, dark shape against the thin mattress, and was asleep in seconds, his breathing even and deep. The silence that fell was heavy. It was just the two of them, the rain, and the manila-colored walls. "We need to clean up," Ria said, her voice sounding too loud in the small space. She soaked the thin motel towels in the sink's hot water and brought them to the small table. They sat opposite each other. The pretense was gone. There was no more EMT and victim, no more kidnapper and hostage. They were just 2 people in a box. She worked on his face first, wiping away the grime. He did the same for her, his touch surprisingly gentle as his thumb brushed a streak of mud from her jaw. Then she untaped the splint on his shoulder. "This will hurt," she said. "I know." She cleaned the raw, puckered joint. The skin was angry and swollen. She rebandaged it, her movements efficient and practiced, but her fingers lingered. His skin was hot. His eyes never left her face, tracking her every movement. The silence was charged, full of everything they couldn't say. She finished, her hands resting on his good shoulder. The room was too small, their proximity too intense. She moved her hand, touching the side of his face, his jaw rough with stubble. "Are you shaking?" she asked, her voice a whisper. Mateo didn't answer. Instead, his good hand came up and rested on her hip, a light, questioning pressure. He was asking. He was waiting for her nod. Ria nodded, just once. That was all. He stood, pulling her with him. His mouth found hers. It wasn't a soft, exploratory kiss. It was a collision. It was desperate, fueled by adrenaline, fear, and the animalistic need to affirm life in the face of death. His breath was hurried. Her shoulders, which had been tense for 24 hours, finally slumped. His back hit the wall, and he pulled her flush against him, his good arm locking around her waist, his fingers tangling in her damp hair. Her hands clutched his shirt. It was a kiss of shared trauma, of rain and salt and metal. It was deep and it was strong, but it was theirs. He broke away, his forehead pressing against hers. He was breathing hard. "You're safe," he whispered, a promise he had no right to make. "Together," she replied, which was the only truth. He looked at her, and a small, wrecked laugh escaped him. She smiled back. They stood like that, foreheads touching, breathing the same air, for a long moment. He reached past her and, with his good hand, pulled the thin, faded curtain across the window, shutting out the storm and the world. Their hands found each other in the dim light, fingers lacing tightly as they sank onto the edge of the bed. In the middle of the night, Ria woke. The rain had softened. Leo was murmuring in his sleep. Mateo was on the other bed, the sheet kicked away. His body rigid, even in sleep. He was cold. She got up and pulled the thin blanket over him. As she did, his eyes opened. He didn't startle. He just watched her. His expression in the gloom was unguarded, vulnerable. His hand came up, not to pull her down, not to touch her face, but to rest, open-palmed, over her heart. He just held it there, feeling the steady beat, a new, deeper trust, forged. He closed his eyes, and she left her hand on his chest until his breathing evened out. Morning came too soon, the gray light filtering through the cheap curtain. Rhea woke to a sound she didn't recognize. Leo's quiet, serious questions. She looked. Mateo was sitting cross-legged on the floor, and Leo was sitting opposite him. He had found a length of nylon cord in Rhea's go-bag. You see, Mateo was saying, his voice low and patient, you make the loop, and the rabbit goes through the hole, around the tree, and you pull. He tightened the knot. That's a bowline. It'll never slip. It's what sailors use to tie up the boat. Like your boat, Leo asked. Just like my boat, Mateo said, smiling. Rhea watched them, the Mafia boss and her son, their heads bent together in concentration, and a strange, unfamiliar warmth bloomed in her chest. Her burner phone, which she'd plugged in, vibrated on the nightstand, a single, encrypted message from Nadia. Rhea's blood ran cold. They know. MIB just issued a warrant. Your name. Obstruction of investigation. The mole is fishing, trying to flush you out. You are officially a fugitive. Rhea showed the screen to Mateo. The quiet, domestic peace of the last 5 minutes shattered. They're boxing us in, Rhea whispered. They'll put my face on the news. I can't run. Mateo stood up, his face set. Then we stop running. We will stop hiding. What are you talking about? We can't fight the MIB. We're not going to fight them. We're going to expose them. He made a decision. Nadia's data bomb drops in. What? 18 hours. We can't wait. I'm going to meet the state attorney general. Now, in public. Mateo, that's insane. They'll arrest you, or Yelena's people will kill you. Not if I do it right, he said, his mind clearly working. A general planning a campaign. The public ferry terminal. Midday. Thousands of people. They can't start a firefight there. I'll send the AG one piece of the video, just enough to prove it's real. She won't be able to ignore it. The MIB can't touch me, and they can't touch you. If we're standing in a public spotlight, they can't turn off. It's too dangerous, Rhea insisted, her hand on his arm. He covered her hand with his. Rhea, I was the anchor that dragged you into this storm, he said, his voice soft but firm. Let me be the sail that gets us both out. She looked at him, at the certainty in his eyes. He wasn't the man she'd pulled from the jet. He was the man who was teaching her son knots. She nodded. They held each other, a tight, desperate embrace in the middle of the cheap motel room. He smelled of damp wood, salt, and the faint, metallic scent of blood. It was the smell of survival. The Port Grey ferry terminal was a cavern of wet concrete and steel, bustling with midday commuters trying to escape the rain. Rhea, Mateo, and Leo stood near the ticket booths. Exposed, Mateo had sent the message 30 minutes ago. He's late, Rhea said, shifting Leo on her hip. She's not late, Mateo corrected, scanning the crowd. She's cautious. At precisely 12:05, a woman in a severe black pantsuit, flanked by 4 men in suits who were clearly not government, approached. She had sharp, intelligent eyes. Elise Hart, State Attorney General's office. She said, her voice low, ignoring the civilians around them. You're Mateo Vascaro. You sent me a video that has made my day very complicated. Show me the original data. Now. Before Mateo could answer, the sound of engines echoed, too loud and too fast. 2 separate convoys converged on the terminal entrance from opposite directions, their tires screeching on the wet pavement. 5 black SUVs. But they weren't all the same. 3 of the SUVs were the familiar, menacing Escalades. The other 2 were different, sleeker, with diplomatic plates. Yelena, Mateo breathed. Doors flew open. The men from the Escalades emerged, dressed in black tactical gear with MIB stenciled in white on their vests. They fanned out, creating a perimeter, their rifles aimed at the crowd. Civilians screamed and scattered. From the other two SUVs, a different team emerged. These men were in gray, bespoke suits, armed with smaller, concealed weapons. They moved with a different kind of precision. A tall man with a shaved head and a calm face, Armin Greaves, stepped out of the lead vehicle, his eyes finding Mateo. "Aurora Tide Security," Mateo said to Hart. "My team," he then pointed at the MIB. "And that's the Kestrel Union. Your MIB is fake." The two armed groups faced each other across the terminal plaza, a 50-yard standoff. Armin Greaves moved, not toward the MIB, but toward Mateo. He nodded. "Sir, the package." "Leo," Mateo said, his voice thick. He knelt in front of his son. "This is Armand. He's a friend. You're going to play that quiet game again, just for a little bit." Armin and a female security officer gently took Leo down to the anchor hold. Sir Armin asked, "Get him to the boat." Mateo's face was stone. Armin, cradling a confused but silent Leo, disappeared with the female guard down the ramp toward the private mooring docks. Now it was just Rhea, Mateo, Hart, and two armies. "They've got us boxed in," Hart said, her own men drawing their weapons. "No," Rhea said. Her voice was shaking, but she was clear. She pulled her other burner phone from her pocket. "You want the data, Miss Hart, you get it, but on my terms." Hart looked at her. "I'm starting a live stream, right now, to 3 different newspapers. You have a choice. You can let them see you seize the evidence from me, or you can let them see you get into a firefight." Rhea's thumb hovered over the Go Live button. Hart stared at her. Then a slow, hard smile touched her lips. "You're the EMT, aren't you?" It wasn't a question. She nodded. "Do it." Then Hart pulled a small radio from her pocket. She spoke into it, not to the MIB, but to a different channel. "This is Hart. I am invoking a municipal charter. I have an active firefight. MIB compromised. I need Port Gray City Police, non-MIB, to this location. Now." The leader of the fake MIB, Yelena, was not among them, must have heard the call. He shouted, "Take them live or dead." He raised his rifle and the air split apart. The fake MIB opened fire. Armin's remaining men instantly returned fire, but they were purely defensive, forming a half circle around Hart, using bulletproof briefcases to create a shield. "Get down!" Mateo yelled. He grabbed Rhea, pulling her behind a massive circular concrete pillar, the main support for the terminal's upper deck. He was a fraction of a second too late. As he shielded her with his body, a round from a rifle ricocheted off the nearby steel railing. A piece of metal shrapnel, hot and sharp, tore through Mateo's already injured shoulder. He grunted a deep, agonizing sound, but he didn't fall. He just pushed Rhea harder against the concrete. Rounds thudded into the pillar, kicking up clouds of concrete dust. The noise was deafening. "You're hit," Rhea yelled over the din. "It's fine." It wasn't. Blood was pouring from the new wound, a dark arterial red soaking through his shirt and the bandage beneath. Rhea didn't hesitate. She was trapped in a war zone, but she was in her element. She ripped the bottom of her own shirt, tearing a long, clean strip of fabric. "Lean on me," she commanded. He braced his good hand on the pillar, and she went to work, her hands fast and sure, wrapping the strip of cloth over his hand, which was now pressed to the wound, creating a new, tight pressure bandage, right in the middle of the firefight. He was groaning in pain, the pillar shaking from the impacts. She finished the knot, and he slumped against her. For a second, everything went quiet in her head. It was just the two of them. He was pale, sweating. She put her hand on the side of his face, and he turned into her touch, his eyes locking on hers. It was an anchor, a promise. "I am here." The sound of different sirens, the high-low wail of city police, not the MIB's European blare, cut through the chaos. At the same time, a white news van, followed by 2 others, screeched to a halt at the curb. A cameraman, using his camera as a shield, ran out. The fake MIB team leader saw it. The cops, the cameras, his cover was blown. "Fall back," he screamed. "Back to the wharf." The fake MIB team deployed smoke grenades, and in seconds they were piling back into their Escalades, engines roaring as they sped away. The terminal was suddenly, shockingly silent, filled with smoke and the cries of civilians. Elise Hart stepped out from behind Armin's men, her suit covered in dust. She walked to Rhea. "The data," she said. Rhea handed her the burner phone with the data capsule. Hart placed it in an evidence bag, signed a receipt, and handed the receipt to Rhea, all in front of the rolling news camera. As the smoke cleared, a voice, amplified and metallic, echoed across the plaza from a loudspeaker on the last retreating SUV. It was Yelena. "A good show, Mateo, but the curtain hasn't fallen. Tonight, Project Swan will be complete. We are moving assets from Crane Wharf 14. Come and stop us. If you have the courage to watch it all sink." The SUVs were gone. Rhea looked at Mateo. He was leaning heavily on her, but his eyes were fixed on the wharf, visible across the gray water. "Crane Wharf 14, he whispered. He knew exactly what it meant. She's not just moving the money. She's moving the entire system, the servers, the hard ledgers. He looked at Rhea, his face grim. If they get those servers onto the Silver Kestrel and into international waters, it's over. We lose everything. That's the final battle. The safe house for the Gray Ledger newspaper was an anonymous apartment high above the city, a place of steel and glass. Nadia Pike met them at the door. "Leo, you're on a special mission," Nadia said, her voice bright and forced. As she took his hand, "We're going to build the best pillow fort you've ever seen." Rhea knelt, her heart breaking. "Mommy has to go to work, baby. It's one more job." "Okay, Mommy," he said, his voice sleepy. He trusted her. "Nadia," Rhea said, her voice low, "the red code. If you don't hear from me in 15 minutes after we go dark—" The story explodes. Nadia finished. "I know, go! Be safe!" Rhea kissed her son's forehead, breathing in his scent, and then she turned and walked away. Crane Wharf 14 was a different world. It was a forest of steel, a dead, industrial jungle where the wind howled, whistling through the massive gantries. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with cold salt spray. In a stolen Port Authority van, the plan was finalized. Elise Hart, Armin Greaves, and Rhea were huddled over a schematic. "It's a three-man play," Armin said, his voice a low, precise rumble. He pointed to the map. "Yelena will be here, at the main gantry, overseeing the load. The asset is here." He circled a green-lit container marked Project Swan. It's not just a server, it's a self-contained, encrypted server bank. The Silver Kestrel is docked here. They have a 30-minute window to load and cast off. "So we split," Mateo said. His shoulder was freshly and heavily bandaged, his face pale but his eyes burning. "I go for Yelena. I'm the bait she can't resist." "Armin, you and a vetted state task force go for the server. You secure the asset." "That leaves the getaway," Armin said. "They have the port's own crane team, the Zan Cats, on their payroll. The moment we move, they'll use the cranes to block us, to drop containers on us. We'll be trapped." Rhea, who'd been listening, spoke. "No, we won't." She pointed to a massive U-shaped machine parked in the schematics, a straddle carrier used for moving and stacking containers. "I can drive one of these." The two men stared at her. "It's a 20-ton piece of equipment." "Rhea," Mateo said. "I drove an ambulance in a hurricane," she countered. "It's just levers. While you two are the distraction, I'll be the roadblock. I'll take the straddle carrier and I will be the wall. I'll stop those cranes from crushing you." The night was absolute. The only lights were the green beacon on the target container and the dim, red warning lights on the tops of the cranes. Rhea was dressed in a heavy, grease-stained port worker's uniform, her hair tucked under a hard hat. Her hands were on the controls of the straddle carrier, its diesel engine a low, thrumming giant beneath her. Her earpiece crackled. It was Mateo, Everyone in position. Alpha team ready, Armin's voice replied. Beta team. Rhea, ready, she said. Her hand was trembling. Just one, tiny shake. Rhea, Mateo's voice came again. For her alone, soft, intimate. Listen to me. Even breaths. You're the best driver I know. I'll see you on the other side. 3, 2, 1, go. She took a deep breath. Her hands steadied. She engaged the gears. Mateo stepped out from behind a stack of rebar, walking into the floodlit circle of the gantry floor. Yelena, he shouted. It's over. Let them go. A figure emerged from the shadows of the crane's superstructure. Yelena Kovac, wrapped in a long, dark raincoat, her silver hair shining. She smiled, a sharp, cold expression. Mateo, you chose your heart over your safety, a foolish trade. She gestured to the silver kestrel. Fine, let's both sink. This was never your empire. Yelena, it was ours. I was trying to save it. Save it, she spat, her voice ringing with contempt. You were strangling it. You can't clean a wound like this. Mateo, you have to burn it out. Start again. As they spoke, Armin and a small 4-man team of MIB agents, all loyal to Hart, broke cover. They sprinted for the green-lit container, their bolt cutters sparking as they hit the lock. Now Armin yelled, swinging the heavy door open. It was a trap. The port's Sandcat team, waiting in the control cabs of the 2 largest cranes, saw them. A horn blared. One of the massive overhead gantry cranes roared to life, its huge magnetic grapples swinging. Not for the server, but for the MIB team. Armin, move, Rhea screamed into her comm. The crane arms swung, smashing a stack of containers next to them, a shower of metal and splintered wood raining down, pinning 2 of the agents. Armin was trapped. But Rhea was already moving. She slammed the straddle carrier forward, its 8 massive tires crushing everything in its path. She drove it straight toward a stack of containers, not around, but over. The machine was designed to do it. It climbed, a 20-ton insect, lifting its chassis high, and she positioned it directly between Armin's pinned team and the swinging, killer crane. The crane operator, enraged, swung the grapple again. It slammed into the side of Rhea's straddle carrier. Sparks erupted as steel scraped steel, the sound a shriek that ripped the night apart. The cab she was in shook violently, but she held her ground. The steel wall held. On the gantry floor, the fight had turned. Mateo and Yelena were circling each other. It's just us. Mateo, the reformer and the purist. You're a killer, Yelena. I'm a realist, she yelled, and she lunged, not at him, but at the crane's main beam. She slapped a small device onto it and pulled back, revealing a detonator in her hand, a magnetic trigger. You, the data, or her. She pointed up at Rhea, trapped in the cab. The moment that server moves, the vibration sets it off. Or I just press the button. Who do you save? Rhea heard it all over the open comm. Rhea, get out of there, Mateo yelled. But she wasn't listening. She was calculating. A trade-off. She looked at her controls. The straddle carrier's frame, the U-shape, was directly over the green server container. Mateo, keep her talking, she said, her voice calm. She hit the lever to lower the carrier's frame, the massive steel arms descending around the server. At the same time, she jammed her foot on the emergency brake, locking the wheels, and then, in a move of pure, desperate improvisation, she jammed the hydraulic lift against the brake, effectively choking the wheels and killing all vibration to the ground. She was trapping herself to cut the bomb's magnetic signal. Now, Armin, she screamed. She grabbed the lift controls, and the straddle carrier's engine roared as it took the full weight of the server container, lifting it 1, 2, 3 feet clear off the ground. The trade-off was made. She had the server, but the bomb and the carrier were now one single, trap target. Yelena's face, contorted in the harsh gantry lights, was a mask of furious disbelief. She looked from the carrier to the server, and back to her detonator. She jammed her thumb down on the button. There was a dry, heavy thunk from the magnetic bomb still attached to the beam. It was the sound of a firing pin hitting a dud, a hollow, metallic click. The chalked wheels and hydraulic pressure of Ria's machine had perfectly isolated the vibration. The bomb had been armed, but it had not been triggered. Yelena screamed, a sound of pure rage, and pressed the button again. Click! Now a kestrel voice shouted, "The Sandcat team," realizing the bomb had failed, went to their backup plan. A different sound, not gunfire, but a series of percussive thumps, low-pressure explosive rounds, designed to shred heavy tires, slammed into the straddle carrier. Thwomp, thwomp, thwomp! The machine, a 20-ton giant, shuddered violently as its rear tires were blown out. The cab pitched, and Ria was thrown against her harness, her head cracking against the side window. Ria Mateo's voice was a roar of terror over the comm. "I'm fine," she yelled, her voice shaking. The carrier was lopsided, threatening to tip. "I'm still holding the server." She fought the controls, her foot jammed on the accelerator, keeping the hydraulics pressurized, keeping the machine from toppling. The cab was vibrating so hard her vision blurred. Sweat dripped from her forehead, falling onto the hot, sparking control panel. On the gantry floor, that single second of distraction was all Mateo needed. He launched himself at Yelena. It wasn't a fight, it was a tackle. He used his good shoulder, his entire body weight, slamming into her, driving her away from the bomb's detonator. They both went down hard on the rain-slicked steel. Yelena's pistol, which she had drawn, skittered away, clattering over the edge and into the dark water below. The fight was brutal but brief. He was wounded and exhausted, but she was lighter. It was a desperate, ugly struggle of leverage and weight, a rolling knot of limbs on the wet ground. Armin Ria screamed into the comm, her body straining against the bucking machine. "The MIB, I have a window." She looked down. Elise Hart and the real MIB team were in the designated receiving bay, a secure, caged-off area. The gray Ledger cameraman was with them, his lens pointed up, broadcasting everything. "Clear," Armin yelled, having freed his men. Ria took a breath. She released the emergency brake and jammed the drop lever. The straddle carrier gave a final, agonizing groan, and the green server container, the heart of Project Swan, dropped like a stone. It fell 20 feet, landing in the receiving bay with a crash that shook the entire wharf. Elise Hart was on it instantly, slapping a heavy magnetic lock and a state evidence seal on the door. "Asset is secure," she yelled, her voice clear for the camera. "We have the ledger." The data was safe. But the fight was not over. Yelena, seeing her life's work lost, let out a sound of animalistic despair. She twisted out of Mateo's grasp. She didn't have a gun, but she had one last weapon. From her boot, she pulled a long, curved hook knife, the kind dock workers use to cut heavy rope. She didn't go for Mateo. She sprinted for the straddle carrier, for the woman who had beaten her. She saw the access ladder to Ria's cab. Ria Mateo screamed, pushing himself up, his wounded shoulder screaming. Yelena was fast. She was on the ladder, climbing, the knife in her teeth. She was halfway up. Ria saw her coming, fumbling with the cab door lock, but she was too slow. Yelena reached the cab platform. She pulled the knife from her teeth and raised it high, aiming for the glass, for the woman behind it. Mateo hit the ladder, grabbing Yelena's ankle. It was not enough. With a final surge of adrenaline, he did the only thing he could. He launched himself up the rungs, not to stop her, but to get between her and the cab. He put his body in the way. Yelena, sensing him, spun and thrust, not with skill but with pure, blind hatred. The hook knife, sharp enough to cut steel cable, plunged deep into Mateo's left shoulder, in the exact same spot where he had already been shot and torn apart. He had chosen to shield Ria. He didn't make a sound. His eyes just widened in shock. The force of the blow threw him back, and he slumped, his back hitting the steel ladder, his body held up only by the knife still buried in him. This was the moment. The world seemed to stop for Ria. She saw the knife. She saw his face. She wasn't an EMT. She wasn't a witness. She threw the cab door open, not caring about Yelena. She stumbled out onto the platform, grabbing Mateo's face with both hands, her fingers digging into his skin as if she could hold him to life. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "No, don't you leave me." His eyes, which had been wide with pain, found hers. They softened. The pain was still there, but something else was stronger. He reached up, his good hand, and covered hers. "Never," he whispered. And in the middle of the rain, on the side of a crane, surrounded by sirens, Rhea kissed him. It was not the desperate, passionate kiss of the motel. It was a transfer of life. It was fast, and it was deep, and it tasted of rain and blood. A heavy thud broke the moment. Armin Greaves was on the platform. He grabbed Yelena, who was standing frozen, her weapon gone, her entire world destroyed. He spun her around, his arm locking across her throat, and slammed her against the railing. "She's done," Armin said, his voice flat. The wharf exploded in light, blue and red. Sirens were everywhere. The real police, the city police, were swarming the port. Elise Hart shouted through a bullhorn, "This is a state-level investigation. All port employees are to stand down Armin Greaves, secure the prisoner." Men were in cuffs. The Sandcat operators were being dragged from their cabs. Rhea helped Mateo, pulling the now loosened knife from his shoulder and throwing it down, pressing her hands to the new, catastrophic wound. She helped him down the long ladder, his arm draped over her, his entire weight on her. They reached the ground, shoulder to shoulder. They looked out at the water. A new boat, a sleek gray interceptor with harbor guard 9 inches on its hull, had its searchlights fixed on the silver Kestrel, which had been trying to slip its moorings. The ghost ship was caught. It was over. Mateo's legs gave out. The adrenaline was gone. He sank to his knees, his head bowing, the pain finally taking him. Rhea didn't let him fall. She went down with him, her arms around him, their foreheads touching. She was covered in his blood. "We live," she whispered, her voice raw, "and then we figure out the long-term love." He laughed, a pained, broken sound, and looked up at her, his eyes full of a lifetime of pain and a single night of hope. "I choose long-term," he rasped. The storm had passed. In the weeks that followed the firefight at Crane Wharf 14, the empire built on shadows collapsed, with the silver Kestrel seized and the server data in Elise Hart's possession. Project Swan was dead. Vanguard Etoile Capital dissolved in less than 10 days, its board members arrested or in flight. The Metropolitan Integrity Bureau underwent a public, brutal purging of its corrupt leadership. True to her word, Attorney General Hart established a multi-million-dollar compensation fund for the port workers whose lives and livelihoods had been used as collateral damage. Mateo kept his promise. His arm, surgically rebuilt and held in a complex sling, was a constant reminder of that night. He walked into the state attorney general's office and confessed to the financial crimes of his father's old empire. He signed the cooperation agreement in exchange for his testimony, which dismantled the last vestiges of the Kestrel Union. He was given a reduced sentence, served by liquidating every black asset he had inherited. Every dollar, every property, every hidden account was funneled into the Aurora Tide Foundation, its mission reborn to support the children of the harbor communities, the ones forgotten in the storm. Life found a new, quieter rhythm. Leo returned to school, no longer the silent boy in the back of the class, but a local hero with a story about a sinking boat. He and Mateo, who was recovering in a small, rented house 2 blocks away, spent their afternoons at Rhea's kitchen table. They were folding paper. "You see," Mateo said, his larger hands still clumsy with the delicate folds, "this one is designed to float. It's an unsinkable crane." He tapped the paper bird he'd made, a far cry from the sleek jet that had sunk in the middle of the night. Leo giggled and launched his own across the living room, a bright yellow promise. Rhea's life changed. Her quiet, fierce competence had been broadcast live on the news. She was promoted, moving from the ambulance to the dispatch center. She was now the shift coordinator, but she did more than that. She designed a new curriculum for the city's EMTs, a mandatory class saltwater first aid and flood environment triage. She was saving lives before the sirens ever started. One Tuesday afternoon, months later, Rhea was in her front yard when the sound of heavy engines filled the air. Her blood ran cold for a single, terrifying second. 5 black SUVs. They were rolling slowly, methodically, down her cul-de-sac. But this time, her neighbors, including Brenda, came out onto their porches. They were smiling. The SUVs stopped, and men in city uniforms got out. They weren't carrying stun batons. They were carrying toolboxes. They began installing new, high-tech community security cameras on the telephone poles. Brenda pointed to the small logo on the side of the lead vehicle. It was the stylized bird of the Aurora Tide Foundation. The neighborhood, funded by Mateo's atonement, was being protected. They applauded Rhea when she walked out her door. Mateo appeared, walking up the path. He was out of the sling, though he still favored the shoulder. He wasn't carrying roses. He was holding a wild, windswept bouquet of seagrass and coastal flowers. "So," he said, stopping at her walkway. He looked nervous, a feeling she had never seen on him. "I hear the house on the corner, the one next to yours, is for sale. I thought I might buy it." Rhea crossed her arms, a small smile playing on her lips. "Is that so?" "Yes. And I was wondering," he continued, taking a step closer, "if you might be available for a date this Friday. I've already checked your dispatch schedule, and I've confirmed Leo's preschool pickup time. I am fully clear." Rhea laughed, the sound bright and free. She went inside, grabbed a yellow legal pad, and handed it to him. "You can, but first you have to sign the official rules of dating for a single mom. Rule 1, my son always comes first. Rule 2, no more getting shot. Rule 3, no more jets." He took the pen, his expression serious, though his eyes were dancing. "I sign on one condition. You add Rule 4, the driver gets to pick the music." Later that evening, they sat on her front porch swing. The sky was clear, the air washed clean, the sunset was a brilliant explosion of orange and purple. In the yard, Leo was running, flying his paper crane, now attached to a long string, a new kind of kite. Rhea leaned her head on Mateo's good shoulder. His arm, the one that had shielded her, came around her waist, his hand resting warm and sure on her back. She could feel his steady, even breathing. He turned his head, and she turned hers. This kiss was not the desperate, frantic collision of the motel. It was not the life-affirming, bloody kiss on the crane. This one was long. It was gentle. It was sure. It was a promise of 1,000 quiet evenings, of shared silence, of a future. Her phone buzzed on the porch table. She sighed, breaking the kiss, and looked at the screen. Elise Hart. She put it on speaker. "Rhea, Mateo, just a courtesy call. The grand jury hearing is confirmed for tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the morning. You'll both be called to testify. It's the last piece." Rhea looked at Mateo, the final hurdle. He met her gaze, his eyes clear and steady. He nodded. Just once. "We'll be there, Elise," Rhea said, her voice strong. "We'll tell them everything, but we're telling it together." She hung up, as if the world was listening. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from Nadia. Had to share. Finally cracked the last encrypted partition on the server. That Project Swan contingency. It was more than leverage. It was Yelena's backup plan. A trust. A massive scholarship fund. Fully endowed. For maritime studies. Specifically for the children of Port Gray Harbor families. The seizure activated it. And Rhea. The very first name on the recipient list is Leo Navarro. The future was wide open. Rhea looked at the street. The 5 SUVs were still there, but their lights were now a soft, ambient yellow. They were not a threat. They were a watchtower. "Any storm passes, eventually," Rhea whispered, looking at the clear sky. Mateo's hand found hers, lacing their fingers together. "But a love," he replied, his voice low. "A love only holds firm when you choose it, and I choose this." He stood, pulling her to her feet. They stood at the door, hand in hand, and watched their son fly his kite in the twilight. They went inside, together, closing the door on a chapter and opening the door on a life. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment below, share your thoughts, and let's connect. Be sure to subscribe to Mafia Boss Story, like this video, and give it some extra love by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.